that was obviously, well, not obviously, but it was perpetrated by 5 men. So I had a lot of my PTSD experience, and the symptoms that I experienced from that was a gross distrust of men, but also a strong fear, which I knew I needed to deal with. I needed to be amongst men to face that and to work with recreating that trust and finding the sorts of relationships that I really, really desire.
Hello world, it's me, Dennis, and we are in search of the new compassionate male. This is our podcast. I am Dennis Tardan, the producer, and I'm here with Clay Boykin, the founder of In Search Of. Hi, Clay.
Hi, Dennis. We have got a wonderful afternoon here in Texas ahead of us. We have Nick Tovey, who's in Australia, who's joining us. And Nick has just recently published a book, The Revolutionary Man, The Modern Man's Guide to Life, Love, and Enlightenment. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Clay. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Nick, when did you get into men's work yourself, or realize that it was something that was valuable to you?
I think there was a turning point early in my 20s when I went through a particularly difficult time after a significant violent assault and subsequent PTSD and depression. And through that experience, I mean, it was a pretty intense experience for me personally, but also it affected my family and my relationship at the time. And what I realized in that experience, I think one of the primary realizations that I had was that I was woefully ill-equipped to deal with life when it falls apart. And so I went on search for a better way to do life, a better way to engage with this thing called life, and recognizing that not only did I not have the skills and the capacities to deal with strong emotion and the vulnerability that I was feeling, I also recognized that the world also didn't want me to be that way. It didn't know how to deal with me in my pain, in my vulnerability, in my brokenness. And so that sort of led me on to, recognize that this is a problem. This is something that is not a good way to be. And then I went on, I searched on for books and information, and eventually that sort of led me down the track of men's work. So that would have been about bit over 20 years ago when I first sort of made that discovery that there was such a thing called men's work.
And this was nascent, so this is fairly early in, I mean, even though, of course, men's work has been around for a long time, as far as it getting into the public consciousness, we were getting the internet to begin to be able to spread ideas and infect in a good way.
Definitely, yeah. It was very, and things have come a long way since then as well, which is fantastic. But yeah, it was definitely in the early days, I suppose.
Wow. Well, I can so relate to some of what you're talking about. And it blows me away that you were in your 20s and asking the big questions. It wasn't until a huge life experience in my 50s before I started asking those questions.
Yeah, and I was asking those questions, but from a tangential place. It wasn't until I came into my 60s in this I really began to deal with the fact that I have a difficult time. I've always had a very easy time, or a much easier time, dealing with women. I have had a hard time trusting men and being able so that was the place I came into it. And Clay, you were into the corporate world through the hierarchy and the patriarchy and that.
I was, and like Dennis, I grew up not trusting men.
Yeah.
And so I sense there may be some similarity there.
For sure. That was for me. That was the trustability of men was a big deal, because not only I think that was probably present in me growing up, but also through my violent assault.
Right.
That was obviously, well, not obviously, but it was perpetrated by 5 men. So I had a lot of my PTSD experience, and the symptoms that I experienced from that was a gross distrust of men, but also a strong fear, which I knew I needed to deal with. I needed to be amongst men to face that, and to work with recreating that trust, and finding the sorts of relationships that I really, really desire.
Wow.
Amongst men.
Well, you were in the professional world at the time. You were working, right?
Yeah. So this happened when I was 22, but before that, I'd already been in the Royal Navy for 5 years. Okay. So I'd left school and joined the military at the earliest possible time I could, which was a week after my 16th birthday.
Oh my!
And so I went. That and that was very much an intentional search for this thing called manhood, and I knew that there was this thing, this mythological being that I wanted to become, and I had all of the ideas that the military was going to be the place that would find that.
Whew. Well, there's another area of similarity.
Yes. We've got a United States Marine over there. I'm Army. We won't get into how the Marines look down on us, but irrespective of that, so your journey back in. How did it come? Did you do through a formal therapy? Did you do through reading? Through the journey into this in the early stages?
Yeah. So the initial journey was, well, basically I came to a point where I had what I would describe as a fairly minor but not insignificant psychotic break. So I came to the point where I just wasn't dealing with life. I could not function. So my first stop was the GP, my medical doctor. And his initial response in his discomfort was to give me a box of pills and send me on my way, which didn't work so well. Surprise, surprise. And so that happened a few times, and I recognized that, okay, I'm not going to get a great deal of help from the medical profession here. So books were my first sort of avenue. And that was also interesting discovery there. The discovery I made was when I went into the, let's say the self-help section of the bookstore, I recognized that all the books were written for women. And there wasn't anything on this shelf that really spoke to me and directed its message directly towards me as a man who was dealing with difficulty in that time. Of course, there was a lot of great wisdom in these other books that were more marketed towards women, which of course I read, and because that was all that was available. But what I really noticed that there was very little at that time, and of course things have changed a lot over this last 20 years, but back then there was very little that was written for me. And that was quite a shock. And then I found meditation, I think, was probably the thing that saved my life, I'd like to say. I think it was a tool that I originally sort of was drawn towards as a coping mechanism for anxiety, particularly in sleep. I wasn't sleeping well. I had an insomnia, but also anxiety was playing a really big part in that. So I wanted to find a way to be able to deregulate that anxiety within myself, and meditation was the trick. And
how was it that you found meditation? Was that part of your reading, or did somebody guide you to it?
Yeah, I can't remember, to be honest, but I was very interested in lots of different aspects of philosophy and spirituality at that time. So I imagine it wasn't a thing that was out of my concept of
Right.
understanding at that point, but it wasn't necessarily something that I'd engaged in and practiced in. So I remember getting a cassette. This was, back in the time when we had those cassette tapes. And I had my little Walkman that I would listen to in my headphones at night with my to my cassette. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. That was my first introduction to meditation, and then I went and studied and became a meditation teacher from that place.
Well, so did that in that process of becoming a meditation teacher? From meditation to that, where along the line did you begin to engage with men's groups?
It would have been around a similar time as I was starting. So I went and started to study, and I was studying different natural therapy modalities, energy medicine, meditation, kinesiology, various different modalities at that point. And I also soon after I began that, I recognized I needed more men in my life. I had a lot of women, and I recognized that there was something that I wasn't addressing in myself, and also getting from the people I was around. So I recognized that there was, and of course, like I mentioned before, I had this deep fear of men.
Right. Yeah. Golly. Well, there must have been a story behind the first time you joined a men's group.
A men's group. Trying to remember that first time. It was terrifying. It was terrifying. I remember. But I also knew that it was something I needed to do. I think there was this inner knowing, which I think drives us all if we choose to listen.
Yeah.
And I knew that this was something I needed to do. It was something that was important for me, and I was going to not only gain a lot from it, but also have something to contribute. So I knew that I needed to be with my fear and do it anyway.
Yeah. Well, how would you describe that men's group? I mean, there's all different kinds.
And when was this? And so catch us up chronologically, so we know in time as things have been increasing, but this is some early stage.
Yeah. So let me try and cast my mind back a little. So this would have been late 90s, I would say. Late 90s, maybe 99, to around the turn of the century. So yeah, looking at 21 years ago.
and so were there already the seeds of men's work happening in Australia?
Very little.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about.
Yeah, so there wasn't much happening, but it was I can't even remember how I got to know this person, but somebody I spoke to gave me a contact, and I went and joined this men's circle. It was it was a one-off men's circle, or this guy had run a few, but not on a regular basis. But it was a men's circle. We sat in a teepee, and it was all very, very strange and very woo-woo, and but also it felt like there was something happening here. There was something of depth which I hadn't experienced before. Definitely not experienced in any of the men's gatherings I've been to before, which would have been very militarized or sport oriented. or standing around the barbecue at a,
right.
at a party or something like that. So this was. Yeah, it was a really interesting experience, and I'd become aware by this time of people like Robert Bly, and
I was going to ask if
yeah. So I'd become aware of some of the things that had been going on in the past, and the men's movement in the early phases.
Right.
So I was like, okay, this is that. This is my first experience of that.
So that was right in the middle of I guess Robert Bly's was kind of mythopoetic time, and with taking perhaps an indigenous tradition and bringing that into the circle. And
yeah, definitely. There's and that's something I've really enjoyed a lot of the time through my work, is I've got a deep connection to Earth and to our I guess our native traditions. Here in Australia, we just celebrated what we call Australia Day yesterday, which is the time of the invasion. So it's quite a poignant moment.
Was that the colonial? Is that the colonial invasion of Australia?
Correct. Yeah. So when the devastation of the first peoples started to begin,
right,
a bit over 200 years ago. So it's quite a powerful moment in our culture here. So a moment where for me personally, and a lot of my friend group, choose to recognize the devastation of those first peoples, and as we came in and stirred things up. So anyway, getting a little sidetracked there, but I guess my pointing to the importance of connecting with ancestry and history, and how much of that we've lost in our modern technology age, where we, particularly as men, I think there's a really big missing piece in our life is the idea of initiation, and of having that moment where it's that the line is drawn in the sand, and we are now a man, and we have certain responsibilities, and of course that's something our traditions, our traditional societies have always done very, very well, and we have lost along the way.
Can you, if it's possible, can you talk about that initiation for yourself? I mean, some of them are sacred and private, and you don't talk about it, so.
Yeah, I think the assault, for me, I see my assault as my initiation.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, I think in traditional societies, the rite of passage that boys go through, and of course girls go through their own, one of the important themes that happen in initiation is the departure, the ordeal, and the return. So it's very much the hero's journey formula, and of course this was an ordeal for me, and it was definitely not one I chose, but I can look back on it and recognize the gold that I was able to gain from that experience, and with gratitude, and I don't know who I would be without it, and I don't know that I'd like the man that I would have become if I didn't have that experience, so I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, and bringing that experience into the men's circle and becoming part of that men's circle, that in itself was probably a rite of passage.
And how do we do that? Because I want to think about this from both a metaphorical and an actual standpoint, because I feel like I am at a place where I am going through, at 72, I'm going through my rites of passage, as I have been in with the men's group, and as I've been here with Clay, and as we've been in search of the new compassionate male, that there isn't a clear guideline of, okay, I missed it at 15, so forget about it. We're not going to be able to that there's a continuity that I can learn across time and come as we are spending time with you, that connects me head to heart, opens my heart to compassion, be able to go my solar masculine and my lunar masculine, and that balance that's within me.
And what was the question there, Dennis?
None. You see, one of the things, the thing about it is that what we forgot to tell you before then is that very often we don't ask a question. We toss. I should have told you that earlier, that we don't ask a question. What we do is we toss something out there and say, maybe there's a bit of meat on the bone that you can go over and take and come back and share with us from that, or just allow the silence to sit there for a while, and eventually Clay will pick it up and take us along the road. Yeah,
beautiful. Something that did come through in what you were saying there is the importance of having our experience witnessed. And I think and that is, I think, key to our rite of passage, is if we're able to bring our experience and have that witnessed by brothers, by elders, by people that hold us, that hold us, that have our back, that are going to be there. Oh yeah, I'm feeling the power of that in my
it is so powerful
right now. It is.
Thank you, Nick.
that has been something that has been crucial in my work and in the men's work that I've been involved in, both as a participant and as a facilitator.
Had you started writing then? Had you already been writing and starting that? Because we're going to be talking about your book, sure. But had you begun writing as a part of your practice?
Not really. I writing something I've found a little bit later on in life. I had an interesting experience with that, because I wasn't the most academic of children at school, and writing was, I grew up with a notion that I was not very intelligent, and both my father and my brother are dyslexic, and it was assumed that I was also dyslexic. So there was this assumption that was sort of imposed on me by my teachers and my parents, and which I then enrolled in, that I'm not going to excel very much in academia. So never chose to be very literary, or I would read books, but it wasn't something that I ever thought I would do myself, write. And then I started to, at some point along the way, I started to journal as a practice, as part of my own personal practice. And that was it was a beautiful way of me being able to express what was going on inside of me in written format. And that was important. That was an important point for me. And then writing became something that I engaged in on a more professional level maybe 10 years ago, when I first started to become and work more in the psychotherapy coaching arena.
When was that? What year did you go into the psychotherapy?
So I qualified just over 10 years ago, and before that I was practicing as an energetic healer at that point. So I'd been in professional practice and on a part-time basis whilst I was still an engineer, and then when I qualified as a psychotherapist, I left engineering full-time and went into counseling in both the public arena, working for NGOs and different youth and men's organizations, as well as in private practice in my own work. I look at the world a certain way, and I think that is definitely part of the qualities of what an engineer has. Okay, there's something broken, how can I fix it? Or we have a problem, how do we solve this? And there's also another aspect of engineering that I'm quite happy that I'm not a part of anymore. And
amen.
And that is the world is all about problems and solving, and there's no such thing as emotion or feeling or relationship.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I had a close brush with engineering.
Engineering
I survived
adjacent?
but I survived. No, I worked in an engineering environment for a number of years, but I'm not an engineer. So anyway, thanks for that sidebar there.
Not a worry.
And having that in psychotherapy, when you look at the human being and you're going in there and you're sitting there and looking at that, the places that were closed off, the places that we are naturally whole, that we've closed off. What can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Well, I've always been fascinated by people, by humans, by something I remember having as a child was this. I was a great observer of the world and of people, and also I had quite a strong and well developed sense of empathy, and I was able to feel people's internal experience and recognize how what they were showing on the outside wasn't what was going on in the inside. And so I was always fascinated by that, and this, it in some ways created this sense of distrust, and because it's like, okay, I'm not getting the truth here. You're telling me a lie because what you're saying isn't reflective in your internal experience and what I'm feeling. So that has been, of course, a really great skill to hone and develop as a psychotherapist, and to be able to feel a person's interior and know or have an understanding of what's going on inside of them from that place, as opposed to the stories they're telling me or themselves or the world. So yeah, it's a very useful skill.
Yeah. Well, and so you started your own men's groups. I mean, you worked with men and you worked with women and throughout your practice, but when about did you form your own men's group?
Yeah, so when I was studying psychotherapy, that's when I started to facilitate my own men's group. Just started off with a small group of a few people that I know mostly, and we just sat in my living room of my house at that point, and had, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful opening. It was a beautiful way of, I guess, me developing my facilitation skills. I'd already done workshops and such from this place, but this was something new and it was my own. And that sort of grew from there. And I definitely, my practice was very much focused on working with men at the initial phases of getting into work, and also the work I was doing in the public sector was predominantly with men as well. The first gig I had as a psychotherapist was running an anger management program for domestic violence perpetrators. So a lot of the men that I was terrified of as my earlier phases of my PTSD experience,
Wow.
So yeah, you say the universe doesn't have a sense of humor.
Exactly.
Now,
exactly.
I have a sense. I could be wrong here, but I have a sense that the men's group or the men's circle that you started looked very different than the one that you first entered.
Definitely.
How would you contrast those, or compare and contrast?
Well, it was more intimate because there was much less people. There was maybe 5 or 6 of us, as opposed to 20 or 30 in the first one I attended. And I remember, I guess I was also holding it, so it was a place of responsibility. It was something that I was, I had this sense of nervousness and you know, who the fuck am I to do this? You know?
Oh my!
Exactly.
Boy, I can
Our
so
old
identify with
imposter
that.
syndrome. You
Yeah.
betcha.
You know, I just to share with you, I started my men's circle in 2012 because I didn't trust men, and I knew that I had to bridge that gap. And that was the same thought. My circumstances were a bit different, but there are some similarities, and I had to get over that because I realized there were only certain things that I could learn from another man.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Now, our approach tends to be more contemplative in nature. You know, for guys that are already in their heart and stuck, you know, for whatever reason, you know, and they may have gone through a recovery program and looking for something more spiritual, but they associate spirituality with religion, and they got burned on religion, so they're not going to go there. Can't talk to their partner or their spouse, just too deep. They got to go to another man. So that kind of describes me. And what I needed was a safe place where I would not be judged and I could be heard, like you were referring. I wanted somebody to hear me and not try and fix me, and to be nurtured. Now, you don't typically hear nurture in men's groups, that, you know, but I kind of have a sense there's some similarities in what you were doing.
Absolutely. And it's interesting just hearing you speak there, Clay. It's around the intentionality of creating something that we need. And that was definitely my driving force at that time as well. It was okay, I need this and I don't know where to find it, or I'm having difficulty finding it, so okay, I'll create it, which is a great way to do it. And what I also noticed in that is this was my experience, it may be different for you, Clay, but what I've noticed in being the facilitator or the holder, there has been at times a place where I can use that as a great place to hide. and it's subtle.
Look at him smile. Look at it. All right,
no, I never. No,
Not
but
me.
Boy,
did you nail him. Boy, Nick, you nailed him.
Okay. Well, now there's the other side of it too, and you're exactly right. I could hide behind it. There's the other side where I couldn't go as deep myself into what I really wanted to, because I was carrying, holding the circle for everyone. And, you know, I've just recently begun to share that. And so I'm still present, but I've got somebody else now facilitating it. And I would kind of cope it, but he's got the lead, so that I can, for the first time in 9 years, I can just participate. A totally different energy. Yes, I can hide, and then I carry the responsibility, and it's nice to step
in
out
their
there,
mind, in the minds of those of us in the circle, that we would say it was Clay's group. That wasn't and that was the thing that he needed to get past. Do you have that in your, you know, that ownership, that it's Nick Tovey's group, and so therefore they look to you, or that you're the elder of the.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's an impossible thing to avoid in a lot of ways. And I've come to the realization and the understanding that that's just the way it is. And so these days, I don't tend to run men's groups anymore. I'll run men's programs and more, I guess, psychotherapeutic coaching programs. But I don't currently run a men's circle, and part of that is because of this reason. Now, as I want to, if I want to attend a men's circle, I want to attend as a participant rather than a facilitator.
Beautiful.
And it's and that's subtle realization I got to, where I recognized that there was a part of me in, a very genuine desire to hold a space, to create a space for men, to be to be the one that can hold that. And that's definitely coming from a good place, but I recognized there was also a place where I would only go so deep in myself, and only share so much of myself because of a very subtle and not really spoken of power dynamic of facilitator participant, which, if you're running whatever it is you're running, you can try and have it as open as possible. But if you're running it, you're putting the marketing out there, you're paying for the rent in the room or whatever it is, you're holding it. There's no getting away from that. And that's actually a really important responsibility to hold. So do it fucking well.
Damn
You're
right.
exactly right.
And Nick, do you see a new in 2021, the men that you're connecting with, are you seeing something happening in the psyche of the men overall? And I know I'm asking a very, very general question, but just the pulse or what the mindset is of the men that you're interacting with. Different. There appears to me to be something cracking. Something has opened and something is going on, and I'm making a completely unprovable generalization, but this is just a feeling.
Without a doubt, Dennis. It's so much as shifting, and we've still got so far to go in a lot of ways.
Both are true.
Hey, Nick, that's some job security there.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
And, and I also know this is to be true, is that men are really hard to market to.
Oh, gosh.
We do not like to listen, to watch and hear somebody say that I've got a problem that I need to deal with. Strangely enough, maybe not most, but a lot of the men that I see either in a one-on-one or in a group program, it's been their woman that has suggested that, or led them towards me. And that's not always the case. There are many, many men out there that are hungry, that want to do the work, that are recognizing the way that they've been living life, the way that they've been taught how to do life doesn't fit the bill, isn't going to provide the sense of satisfaction and wholeness and freedom that they desire. And they're sensitive to the fact that this particular time in human history is calling us to up to a different way of being. The way our fathers did it and their fathers did it just isn't going to cut the mustard anymore. And we're living at a time, and this is why I call the book The Revolutionary Man. It is a revolution in many ways of manhood, but we had the women's revolution, that happened, and it's amazing. And yet we haven't quite had the men's revolution, and we've just been like on the sidelines going, oh shit, what do I do now? and in the process getting really confused around how to show up as a man when the messages of manhood that I am receiving from the world are kind of confusing. They're still very much the old bullshit ideas of man up and be tough, be stoic, stand
patriarchy.
Up to the old patriarchal views. They're still very, very present, but yet we've got these other messages where we're wanting to be in touch with our feelings and be good communicators and hold vulnerability and it's like, how do I do both? How can I do both when one message is saying, okay, if I'm going to be that, then I need to shut down my heart and not show vulnerability. And then there's this other message which is saying, no, we want to see your heart. And then sometimes, this is the extra confusing piece, if I do show my heart, I get shamed for it. I get abandoned, or nobody's there to hold me in it.
The trick seems to me that to be able to show up and have a presence that represents both. It's a yes and to find a way to integrate, because one of our previous guests talked about, and Dennis mentioned it, the solar masculine and the lunar masculine. Another way to say the male energy, the female energy,
the yin and yang.
Yin and yang, yeah. And he said something that really struck me. He said, yes, lunar leads and solar executes. You have to have both. And it just simplified for me. And so for me to show up as a complete man, I have to integrate both. I have to show up. And to be able to have that presence that brings that energy of both at the same time. I think we're at a level of consciousness where we can do that, or we can grow into that space.
Tell me about the impetus for the Revolutionary Man. Tell us about that, about your what got your fire to write this book.
It's been a book that's been many years in the making, I think, and there it is.
And I love the R.
It's lovely to see.
I love you breaking off. I love you bracketing the R. Was such a what a powerful piece.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. And there's good intention behind that, and my reasoning for that is recognizing that the definition of evolution being passive and gradual change that happens over time, and which we may not necessarily be consciously engaged in. It's just happening to us, where revolution is when we get to a point where it's like, okay, enough, things need to change, where I consciously take hold of my own evolution, and I'm inspired to act and create change, where I reach a tipping point of frustration, of tension, where it's like, fuck this, enough. I need to make change. And of course that happens on a personal level and on a collective level. So my vision, my experience is that we are really at a point where we're in the midst of that revolution, and as it is definitely happening to us. There is an evolution that is happening to us, but yet we get the opportunity to actually take choice, to make choice and take action and go, okay, I'm gonna engage in this from a conscious place, and make the changes, become the man that I know I can be, and which is free from the old bullshit ideas around what that is and what that should look like. And really being able to show up as myself, regardless of where I sit along the spectrum of masculine and feminine,
right,
and who I happen to be attracted to, or any of that. None of that makes any difference. I'm a human being. I happen to be born in a male body, and there are certain gifts and qualities that come with that, and I have access to the whole spectrum.
Yeah. So
that touches me so much, because I've really come in the past few years clearer and clearer to the realization that I am incomparable, that I am here only to be the most authentic Dennis Tardan that I can possibly be. I cannot compare myself to you, Nick, or to Clay, or to anyone else. And the instant that I do, I begin to lose my power. The instant that I do, because I forget about that my job is to be that authentic, to be the greatest authentic, however that shall manifest, because it will emerge, and it is and evolutionary.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's not only our birthright, it's an obligation that we hold. It's like
So true.
You know, how dare you rob the world of your fullness? You know, who are you not to show up as your full self,
Yep.
to hide behind a mask, to pretend you're a certain way that you're not? You know, it's like, please, we want you. We want everyone to show up in their fullness. The world needs that.
Jesus, Nick, that rocked me down to my core.
Yeah.
Oh man, did that feel? I felt that down to my toes.
My hope, and maybe I'm projecting here, but I believe that there is that young men today are more equipped to understand what you just said.
Yes.
Than I know I was when I was in my 20s,
and
30s.
Get there faster.
And get there faster.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. You know, I'm a little younger than you guys, I believe.
Right. I'm 72. Clay's is mid-60s. You're how old today?
I'm 46, so
Perfect.
I'm a baby in comparison.
Perfect.
With wisdom of the ages, brother.
And I have daughters that are in their late teens and early 20s, and and I have clients, male clients in their early 20s, and when I meet these men, I am blown away by the level of sensitivity that they have, the level of recognition of what's going on in the world and how they can show up, the intelligence that they have, the connectedness to the fullness of life. And what I think is really interesting and important to recognize is that, you know, our fathers didn't have this opportunity to have conversations like this. Yeah.
Nope.
They didn't have, there was no such thing as this conversation, as personal development in our father's life. You know, we are literally the first generation of men to live on the planet that get to explore this question, you know, what it is to be a man. How do we show up in the world in our authenticity, in our truth, in our fullness, with the gifts that we have of connectivity, of information, of the support that the world is giving us to be able to do that.
You know,
that's exciting.
Oh,
isn't
you're
it
dang
just?
right. You know, this professional resource that I go to every once in a while, they call it Facebook.
Yes, the Facebook. Yes.
Well,
come and tell me, Viktor. Tell me everything that you're thinking.
Well, I'm part of and I'm wondering if you are too, of a Facebook group called Men's Group, and it's run Brett Chernin.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine.
Okay. And
he's
I had
lovely man. What a lovely man.
We had a great conversation. He was on podcast a couple months ago, I guess, a few months.
Great.
Yeah.
But somebody said, I'd posted something and he said, well, what's the difference between the new compassionate male and the, you know, new age sensitive guy of the 60s, 70s? And I thought, first of all, I said, well, that's a really good question. And I responded, I said, well, that in the 60s, 70s was a pendulum swing.
Yeah.
What I believe we're doing now, as we said it earlier, is an integration. And that's what you're pointing to.
Yep.
We're the first to be able to recognize that and bring that forward, and the younger folks get that on steroids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to ask is that because if we think of this in anthropological time, we may not see the finish of this cathedral. We may be just putting a few bricks down in the cathedral as we're building it, but it is happening. And our opportunity to be able to put the bricks down and to lay them down, and it's just feels so meaningful. to be there at the time when it was happening.
What if, Dennis, what if we can? Because change is happening incredibly fast.
Yes.
Exponential. And I believe that we can see.
I love you saying that, Clay, because that really does, because I find myself falling into old paradigms and using old metaphors, and I always need a new metaphor. Give me a new metaphor. So let's figure out a new one. Take that one, let's take that dead horse and throw it out, and let's try another metaphor.
I think we will see it. We are seeing it.
Maybe we're already there.
Yeah. Yes.
Would we recognize it if we were? That's the whole point
exactly.
about it. Had we...
Let me add this. It's not a destination, but we're on the right journey.
Thank you.
Finally.
It's a state of being rather than a state of yeah, exactly.
Yeah. For sure. And I also feel, and I think this is an important thing to recognize, is that when we're talking about the younger generation and the millennials, it's important that for us to lay the foundations and to walk the path ahead of them, and also allow them to walk their own path, and not tell them how to do it. And as a lot of our sort of elder generations have done to us, and I think we have to recognize that the world that they're living and creating is very different to the one that we've done and we've created. And we don't know what their world is like. And yes, there are certain aspects that we can support and offer guidance with, and definitely the book provides that, and that's been my intention, is to say, like, this is a map. It's not the territory. This is the map that is going to help you navigate life, and it may look very different to mine and the next guy that reads the book, but it's not the territory. You need to take the steps. You need to walk the fucking walk, and yours is going to look different to mine, and I bless you on your path.
Oh, I love that you said that. I'm sitting with that one.
I am too. Likewise, and I love that because it really requires me. It takes me out of any victimhood and puts me right into the space of that I get to show up. Totally,
and that's such an important posture to hold for oneself, is recognize that I have the power. I have the ability to make the choices that are going to create this life that I get to live. It's not something that I'm handed or that I'm restricted in. It really is up to me in every moment. And this is, thank goodness, this was the realization I made for myself back then, when I was in that place where I was broken, and I recognized I needed to take charge. I needed to not succumb. And of course, I had moments where I was very much in my victim state.
Oh, of course.
But I recognized that I didn't want to stay there.
Wow.
Nick, what a beautiful, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to bring this part of the show to a close. I'm going to leave and let you have the after party, the after conversation that people can enjoy with Clay. And Nick, you are a gracious, a deeply gracious, a lovely human being. And I want to thank you for getting the chance to come on and spend a little time with us on the show. Clay?
Absolute pleasure, Dennis. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to say it and say it many times. Nick, will you come back?
Absolutely.
Love to have you back on.
Exactly. And we will see you, and of course we will see Clay, and I'll get to be along too, and see you next time on In Search of the New Compassionate Male.
So when did it come out?
The book was released on the 21st of December.
So it's just out.
2020, so it's just out. I initially released it just on Kindle version on the 20th of December. I'm having the paperback official launch, even though it is available, as you know. I'm having the official launch of that next Monday, Australian time.
Oh, congratulations. Wow. Well, and I got it on Amazon.
Yeah.
And I got it overnight. It came overnight.
Really?
Yeah, it did. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for buying it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure it wasn't the first.
Definitely not. But yeah, how tell me, how is it? Yeah.
I immediately saw that there's a foundation of commonality, because I'm going to compare how you're doing it to how I'm doing it. And there's a real commonality and compatibility with how we approach it. And the first thing I wanted to know is this, I call it, trying to break into the guy to get him into his heart. And I don't see that being the way you're approaching it. And that's not the way I'm approaching it.
I guess for me, as you would see in the book, so that the model that I use, which I call the pillar of potency, is the 4-tiered progression. So we start at the foundation, which is presence, and ultimately presence is about being connected to our moment-to-moment experience as we're experiencing life in our body. And so what am I feeling in my sensations? What am I experiencing in my emotional realm? What are my thoughts? How am I being driven by my environment, or how am I responding to my environment? Being connected to my body, deeply connected to my body, because of course that's how we experience life, is through our body. And of course this is this is often the biggest challenge a lot of men face, is being connected to their body, because they're so focused and taught to be up in their mind, to be very cerebral and analytical, and looking at the world through the lens of analysis rather than experience. So what that for me is the first place we want to get to, is, okay, get out of your head and into your body. What are you feeling? And it's amazing. It's always amazing to me when I ask somebody to do that, they give me a description from the mind. It's so far from their realm of experience that they don't even know how to do it.
They don't have the vocabulary.
They don't have the vocabulary, but also the connection. It's like, if I just sit right now and notice, it's like, okay, there are so many sensations I can feel in my body. And even just from the pressure of the chair that I'm sitting on my legs and my bum, it's like that is, I'm present to that. I'm in my body. I'm connecting to that, or I'm feeling an itch on my left shoulder. But most of us are going through life not being aware of actually what's going on in our body in the moment.
So true. Well, so that's your foundation.
That's the foundation. So that's presence. That's the first tier of the pillar of potency. And from there, we move up to power. So power is, with what gifts and qualities and strengths and values do I create life on my terms? How do I show up in life fully connected to my deep authenticity? And how do I penetrate life from a place of deep presence? So this is the important point, is as we progress up the pillar of potency, we take the previous layers with us. We don't forget presence, we bring it with us up into power. So if I'm fully deeply connected to my sense of power, then where am I creating life from that place?
I really like when you said, power and associating that with deep authenticity. That's the source of true power. I really like how you said that.
Yeah. So I use, let me try and remember the quote, but in the beginning, the opening quote of the chapter on power is a beautiful quote by Viktor Frankl, which is one of my favorite quotes of all time.
I love Viktor Frankl. I bet you I know what it is here.
Yeah. Would you like to read it for me?
I will.
Yeah.
Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, the freedom to choose his own attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose his own way.
Isn't that power?
Oh, it is. And God bless Viktor Frankl.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. From the book Man's Search for Meaning, definitely essential reading for anybody who wants to understand their place in the world a little more, and comes from a man who, he wrote this book from his experience in the concentration camps in the Second World War, where you would imagine freedom is the least thing that you would ever connect with, and power through that sense of freedom. But his experience was finding, in whatever moment he could, in whatever way he could, was the sense of a connection to himself and the recognition that he gets to choose how he responds to this moment, and no one can take that away from him, as he says in the quote.
It's such a powerful message coming from his presence. It was so, when I was just beginning to get conscious, beginning to wake up, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, and Joseph Campbell. Those were two cornerstones for me. And of course it blossomed from there.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. So 1, 2,
so then from power, we go up to passion. So this is where we come up into the heart. Yeah. So what I think, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on this from the search for the compassionate man.
Yeah.
What I sense is the heart, the realm of the heart, is of course a beautiful place to be, and it's also a place where we can, it's the realm of the poet, of the artist, of the activist. And what I also see a lot of and have experienced in my own life is how that can very quickly burn me out and lead to insanity. when being in the heart and utterly consumed by the heart, by that fire of passion, if I don't have my deep connection in presence, it'll burn me to a crisp. So again, as I mentioned before, we hold that deep to our connection to presence. We connect with our sense of power and authenticity, and how I want to, what are the guiding strengths and qualities that want to burst through my life, and how do I bring that up into the heart and find my heartbreak from that place where I'm deeply grounded in presence, connected to my power, and fully allow myself to meet life with my heart wide open.
Yeah.
No matter how fucking painful it is, because it will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I got another hour I could go into that. Well, and then so then after passion,
we move. So one of the primary desires of passion is finding that place that brings a tear to our eye. So it's like, what is the cause in the world that makes me cry, that hurts me? What is the thing that pisses me off, that really pisses me off, and so then we move up to purpose. So purpose is the realm of, what is your life for? What is this life that you've been gifted? How can you bring this into the world in a way which is deeply grounded in your passion, deeply connected to your power, and rooted in presence. Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true. Right there between purpose and passion was where my break was. I knew what my passion was, but I was denying my purpose. And at 53, I found myself with a mystical experience that ended up with a quintuple bypass, heart attack. Wow. I had burned my candle at both ends, climbing the wrong ladder, because that's what I was supposed to do, like we talked earlier.
Yep.
And it basically cost me my life at that point. But it was also at that point that I found the most incredible peace, realizing what was happening to me. There was no fear, and there was this awakening that set me on the journey that I am. So I really like how you've positioned this, because I said that's where I was. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think an important point that we can make in this, and like I said, it's really important to come back to the fact that we can't just focus on one of these tiers without the others. It is a transcend and include model where we need to move upwards through the pillar, and we can't focus on purpose and then hope to get presence later.
Right.
Yeah?
It's all integrated.
Exactly. It's an integration model. And of course, we can have moments where we are more aligned to purpose or passion or power or whatever it is at that moment, but they all need to work together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think this is one of the mistakes a lot of men make is this belief that our role in the world is purpose, and is to be a good to be someone that provides something to the world, and nothing else. Yeah. And that is my ultimate goal as a man in the world, is to be a good provider, to be successful, to be engaged in a career pursuit that makes me something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nailed me.
And you and a gazillion other men, and of course I've been there myself, and it's how much how many men have gone through that experience, and often in midlife, where it's like, what the hell have I been doing all these years? I've been putting all of my energy into this career pursuit that does not give me anything back. Yeah, it may pay me well. It may give me some sense of status and an identity, but it's all paper on the wind. It doesn't mean nothing.
Yeah. And I so love how, going back to your true power is in your authenticity. Goodness, if I had known, things would have been different. I so appreciate how you expressed that.
And this idea of power, to come back to power, it's got a bit of a bad rap, this idea of power, particularly masculine power.
Right.
Yeah. And so we've been, I guess, as a sort of flow-on effect of the women's movement and the idea that patriarchy is bad, and of course there's absolute truth in that, and yet that's not what we're talking about. Power is like we said, it is freedom and power are like two snakes intertwined. They go together. We cannot have full freedom without power, and vice versa. And to be able to be free in myself, to express myself, my truth, my authenticity, and without apology, without editing, without dumbing it down, that's true power. And power in itself, and I talk about this in the book, is often what we see as power in the world is coming from this place of scarcity where there's only a certain amount of power to go around. So I'm going to get it all for myself and take it away from you.
Yeah.
Where true power is about sharing. It's in absolute abundance. There is an infinite amount of power. I was just going to say,
yes.
And so power is about how can I lift you up?
Yes.
You know? Rather than how can I put you down? Which is, of course, the fear-based, scarcity-based power that we so often see in the world, which isn't power at all.
So well said. So well said. Well, I rest assured I'm going to go through the book with my pencil and my highlighter and just really absorb it. And I so appreciate everything that you've shared.
Well, thank you so much, Clay. It really has been such a I've really enjoyed.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be.